what are you looking for? And you go, stuff, I don't know. So we're trying to figure out how you can have a moment of discovery, kind of finding different pathways, because not everybody thinks the same about how they're going to get to an object they might be interested in, that you can create those pathways. So, it's trying to get past that mental cloud of like, what'd you see at the art fair today? Stuff. It's how do you make a more concrete, sort of sticky memory about things?
Welcome to the Artelligence Podcast. LiveArt's look behind the scenes at how the global art market really works. I'm your host, Marion Maneker. This podcast is brought to you by LiveArt, the global art marketplace that puts you in control. Download the LiveArt app to get all of the most relevant art market information, as well as access to exclusive private sales. Or visit us at liveart.io. LiveArt is a platform for providing transparency to the art market. Our app gives users access to live auctions, in-depth analysis, and historical price data for artworks. It is also a peer-to-peer trading platform. In this episode, we speak to George Odell, who heads sales at LiveArt, and his colleague, Kelly Cahn, about their views of the current art market. We also take a little time to talk through how sales work on the LiveArt platform. I hope you'll enjoy it. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me about LiveArt. But before we talk about the platform and how it works, I wanted to get a sense from you. We had one of the wildest years in the art market in 2021. People went away to ski or warm climates, and things are beginning to start up again. So I wanted to get a sense. You've been talking to buyers and sellers over the last several weeks. I wanted to get a sense from each of you, sort of where you see the market, what you think there's been some change in the capital markets that may affect these things. Sort of, what's the state of play early in 2022? I
think, that question about people going to sunny or snowy places and being outside of the traditional markets, for years we've talked about the art market being a global market. And now I actually think it is a truly global market, with everything having to go online and be remote. People have learned how to interact, engage, trade, talk, discuss. And it doesn't need to happen over coffee on Madison Avenue. It doesn't need to happen during an art fair. It can happen over a phone call, over a Zoom, over a peer-to-peer marketplace, as we are introducing into the contemporary art ecosystem. So I think in 2021 and 2022, we truly began what is a global market. You don't necessarily need to be in the tri-state. You don't necessarily need to be in Hong Kong, London. You can do things from afar. Yes, those hubs remain important and travel does remain important, but I think further people can be engaged with art, look at art, then decide to travel for pleasure and see art, but also in the business of art, do it from afar whilst doing other things.
So what are the triggers for that? I mean, it used to be either an art fair or a gallery exhibition. We know a lot of it takes place socially. People go to someone else's home for an event or whatever. But now is it Instagram? Is it other things?
I think people are gathering a lot of information from social media, from Instagram. You have artists like Jordy Kerwick who have developed huge followings. And, you have a lot of clients coming to us saying that they found artists via Instagram, that may or may not be represented by major galleries, but the way they're accessing that information is not necessarily the way they used to by walking into an art fair or walking into a gallery. They're seeing that information on, influencer accounts or, they suggested posts, things like that.
But they come to you, not to DM the artist on Instagram, or they come to you after they DM'd and got told no, there's nothing for sale.
I think it's both of those answers are correct. And part of that too, it's, art is a want, not a need. And there's a consumer mindset to getting to things, first discovery. And you can probably trace the origin of where we are today back to the point of PDFs for art fairs going out in advance. There's a moment where you walked into a major fair, Basel, whatever it might be, and nothing is really available. It's all gone. You're just there to say, yeah, I'll take that. Oh, I want the first reserve on this. And what happens in the background is this kind of secondary horse trading market, with the push for auctions going online. I can remember during my tenure at the auction houses, in the back of a day sale, you'd have all dealers and collectors who are dealer-minded, trading information, selling to one another. There's sort of this tertiary market around the market, like a true marketplace. And so with everybody being separate from each other, but still seeking that conversation, that advice, you have this movement of information, ideas, advice, and then, ultimately exchanges of artwork and money. So
I've always thought that the day sales were the most like the old 17th century Dutch coffee houses, with a main event, but as much din taking place around the edges. And
that the social sport of that was like one of my favorite things to be a part of.
And do you think that's going to go away, or is that diminished now that there's more things are happening on social media, more things are happening on, a peer-to-peer marketplace like LiveArt?
It's an evolution of where that conversation takes place. Now it's in private WhatsApp channels, it's across peer-to-peer marketplaces. It's collectors have always tried to trade amongst themselves, the direct, path of least resistance to finding who wants the thing that you would like to sell or who has the thing that you would like to buy. And thus is born the dealer culture, because that is the ultimate gatekeeper there. And with technology comes change as to where those gatekeepers lie and who ultimately is the gatekeeper. So, it's just the changing nature of where the conversation flows.
And no one ever wants to buy the thing that's for sale. They always want the thing that they can't get a hold of.
100%.
The thing that's not available. Absolutely.
And on the buyer side, what drives that with people coming to you? Is it that the frustration? They're sort of tried a couple of routes and they basically say, Kelly, what can you do for me? How do I get a Jordy Kerwick? Because I can't find one that I like, or I can't find one that I think is the right price.
Right. Lack of access for whatever reason, tends to be what drives people. If they can't get a work from a gallery show, if they, were outbid at auction, but they're still active at the same level, kind of all sorts of reasons, or, the work that got away, but they're still very interested in that series that sold 2 years ago, and maybe they weren't ready to buy at that time.
And also, what's the motivation for the acquisition, the adding to collection, and where they are in the collecting journey? Not everybody's going to be in a position where, the artist they love is going to come at the price of acquiring an entire gallery's program. And almost nor should it. Why should another artist's work be the consolation prize to get to the thing that you want? Sure, patronage is very important, and it's a long-standing part of art. But at the same time, people want to be decisive with how they spend to get the thing that they ultimately really want. And if that means going to the secondary market and jumping the queue to find that thing rather than buying one to donate one, or, like I said, absorbing a bunch of a program that ultimately isn't really of interest, that might actually ultimately end up on the secondary market in a more diminished market than the thing that they really want. These are the triggers that have people come into the secondary market, to come to people like Kelly and myself. In the LiveArt market provides a chance to go direct, so that they know at the end of the day that the offers that they might make across LiveArt market are getting to the end user. They're not being watered down through a series of intermediaries, the nasty word of a runner. Any kind of dissolution of their offer is negated by the fact that it's a peer-to-peer.
The daisy chain, I think, really frustrates a lot of people, and I think a lot of people have experienced that without even realizing it at the time, only to, have dinner a year later and realize that they were never as direct as they thought they were.
There was a court case a number of years ago where someone was being interviewed about an art transaction, and the judge was asking the person on the stand, and so that person you were talking to was the seller. Oh, no, there was another person behind it. So that person, no, there was another person behind them. And the judge was just looking like, how do you people function this way?
Many walls of opacity.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think things are going in terms of where tastes are? I mean, what was so interesting about the last year is the top of the market did well with the big collections. The bottom of the market was doing well with people buying all sorts of emerging artists and all. It's sort of rare to see the art market firing on all cylinders that way. And I know there's, we still have a lot of interest in figurative work. We still have a lot of interest in African diaspora painters and all, but we also seem to have interest in a lot more artists of a broader range. Are there any sort of themes that you are there historical artists who are coming back or being rediscovered artists who didn't quite get their due in their time, or is it really just artist by artist?
I think it's a little bit of all of those things. There's a lot of artists that we're rediscovering. There's a lot of desire to go back and find these artists that never quite had their due. At the same time, we've seen such a huge moment for figuration. But artists like Cecily Brown and that sort of abstraction is still as strong as ever, and interest is only growing.
Before it was like a pendulum swing. I can remember a few years ago when it was, who's the second tier of the Zero movement that needs to come to light, right? It's the Dada Minos and the Skeggies and everything else that was populating the European sales. And then we moved to the lesser known sides of the color field movement, enter Sam Gilliam, enter Alma Thomas. And now I think we've kind of moved to, there's so many people engaged in the conversation of art of the 20th and 21st century that people are just looking for what motivates them. And that comes with different levels of seeing, different levels of education. And none of it's right or wrong. Everyone has an opinion as to what it is, but it's also fueling kind of a hydra of people going in many different directions. And, it'll be interesting to see where the next turn goes and what that looks like. We've been through, corrections in the 90s, in the early 2000s at the time of the last recession. There was the clearing of the younger contemporary sort of macho male MFA graduate in 2013, 2014. And now we seem to be at this place where all these pillars of collecting are being knocked down, and you can find a Jordi Kerwick down the hall in a home next to a Lucio Fontana, and that's not weird at all anymore. So, part of it might be just a kind of scattered gun thesis, non-thesis approach to collecting. Yeah. And part of it might just be people going, you know what, in this pandemic life, you only have one life, collect what you want to collect, and who cares why that is that you collect it.
Totally.
And do you think people are trading more than they used to? If there's an eclecticism and a sense of love the one you're with, I like this now, I'm going to have it. I don't need to build a certain type of collection, but there also feels like there's a little more interest in sort of, I've had that for a while, I'm ready to move on.
I think there's there's an emerging class, and I'm going to borrow a line from an interview you just gave. Somewhere between flipper and collector is a new class called a rising merchant class almost, called the art buyer. They're not quite a collector yet, but they're not actively flipping everything. They're learning to live with what they love, but they're acquiring a lot. Maybe that's a lot of financial misfires. Maybe that's a lot of financial hits, but it's a group that is learning to live with art, learning what it means to be a collector, but they might not be into that capital C collector world yet. I'm not trying to be disparaging, but I think it's an evolution of how you engage with buying art, living with art, and managing a collection, because it is, collection management's a financial burden to a certain extent.
More than a certain extent. It's one of the hidden costs that no one ever... Right,
they don't tell you about it when you drive it off the lot.
And the bigger your collection gets, the storage bill or the thing you need to build to show it off. My only guess is that, you were saying this earlier about, the buying the program and all. So much art collecting used to be about going to the gallery dinner, going to the artist studio, getting closer to the artist. And it feels like, and maybe this is just because of the pandemic, it's more now about being connected to other collectors through transactions or owning similar things that other people do. And it's really a kind of social art market more than it is about, patronage or being connected to art.
Yeah, it's almost like a personal salon, right? You are at your apartment, someone comes around, they admire a picture, they say, oh, you should see the picture I have, and then you go see it, and what's next to that picture, now you're interested in that. Next comes the introduction to try to find one for yourself, and that might be the gallerist on the primary level, that might be the artist studio even, depending on how young the artist is, or it might be that person's connections at LiveArt, Christie's, Sotheby's, Phillips, some secondary dealer, whatever it may be.
So if I come to LiveArt looking for something, either I'm browsing the marketplace and see a work that I'm interested in, or I want to get in touch with either of you, what's the process? How does it better that I'm on the know what I'm looking for, or is it better that I just sort of look for something and then I sort of get in touch when I see the thing I want?
It works both ways. You can log on to the app and you can see a selection of what we have. You can reach out and inquire on any of the works. If you see something and you're ready to make an offer, you can do that directly to the owner and they can say yes or no. But we also have a number of people that reach out and just say, here's a list of artists that we're interested in. Can you let us know when you get anything in? Sometimes people want a more active approach and they say, I'm looking for work by so-and-so. Can you go out and actively source that work?
And part of it, too, is, LiveArt starts as a data company. So our base level audience are people who are interested in the data of what's occurring in the art market. That's where LiveArt was born from, was tracking auctions in real time. And I think that's grown, and your editorial has put color around sort of movements and things that are happening. And at the end of the day, we the people behind LiveArt, are also active collectors, engaged in the market, in conversations, and very happy to share that information to help people. We don't come out to say we're advisors, but make more informed decisions. The data set informs you on one level, putting color around that, putting some information behind it, rounds out what that data could be telling you to help you make an informed decision. The general goal of LiveArt, going back to the idea, are there more traders in the market, is elevating the collector to understand what the shifts, movements, financial values of their collection could be, to make those more informed decisions. Is it worth selling this now because my taste has changed? Like, will I get a nice return that will help me move into something else? Or, did I buy this and now it's worth pennies on the dollar compared to what I paid for it? And what's my exit strategy? Or how do I, manage, trim, merge a collection? Because, collections have to start, but then two, collections that don't change are museums. They're actually mausoleums. That's the archive. And, there's plenty of books written by, thinkers and artists alike about the idea of the collection as an organic extension of the creative output of the artists that are in that collection.
Richard Prince once said in an interview, there are as many good collectors as there are artists, which is to say, not as many as you think. It takes a lot more, and it's always open-ended. I think this idea that it's easy or finished, or that an advisor can do it for you, an advisor's like a decorator, kind of misses what's absorbing and exciting about being part of this. And I think one of the other things you're trying to say is, in many ways, the platform is meant to be the advisor. It's not a substitute, but it gives tools that an advisor would use. In fact, we're encouraging advisors to use the tools as best they can.
Speak our language, and also if collectors working with advisors are using that language, the start of that professional conversation you're engaging in starts at a higher level. It starts at a more informed level on both sides, so you can probably get down deeper. What is the, sort of traditional or stereotypical advisor run around Chelsea on a Saturday afternoon activity? Well, wouldn't that be better if you came in, well-read, well-informed, at least on recent market changes, not having to digest every single article, but you have a generally good idea of how things are going. So then you can not have to think about that so much and just assess the picture that you're standing in front of.
And you have access to historical data that you can slice and dice many different ways to give yourself a sense of, what's going on in any individual artist's mark.
And the fact that it's on your phone means you can do it right there. It's the reference point right in front of you, no matter where you are, as long as you've got 5G.
Now, let's go back to the selling process, because it's not just about being connected from buyer to seller. We handle the transaction for you. Can you just describe what happens? I mean, I suppose we should first point out that there is a onboarding process where buyers have to be vetted and verified, and then the transactions can take place. So can you just describe that process?
Sure. So when someone wants to sell with us, we KYC verify them. So we get a copy of, financial documents, past invoices, a copy of their license or passport. And then they send us details of an artwork. We, talk about pricing. We come to an agreement on what we think the correct retail price is. We take a flat 10% on any sales over $25,000. For any prices under $25,000, we add $1,500 to the buyer's end. But then, once we've agreed on a price, we list the work. If we have interest, we go to them with any offers. When we have a deal in place and money in escrow, we have the seller ship the work to Delaware, where we have the work condition checked, and the buyer gets a copy of the condition report. They okay it before any of the funds are released to the seller. And once everything's okay, then the work is released to the buyer. So it's fairly straightforward. It protects everybody, both the buyer and the seller. We want to make sure that, the works that we're getting are in the condition that, they're promised to be in, that everything's in good condition. And, in that way, everybody kind of agrees and has all the information in front of them.
And the anonymity becomes a feature. It's easier for the buyer and the seller having an intermediary who takes care of some of the risk aspects of the transaction to know and have confidence that. And if there are problems with the deal, it gets reconciled through LiveArt?
We intermediate. Technically, buyer and seller are in contract with one another, which is standard of any actual. People read through an auction contract, it's exactly the same, especially in Europe. So buyer and seller are in contract with each other, try to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible. Not 100% of the time anywhere in the industry. Let's just, speak fairly about that. But we do our best to intermediate and solve issues as they arise.
And let's talk a little bit about where the art is coming from. Who's listing as sellers on the platform? What types of sellers are there?
Mostly private collectors. A lot of these works are things that, people have had in their collections that they're thinking about deaccessioning. We're working with estates on selling things. We work with trade sellers on individual works as well.
Yeah, it's a healthy mix and a full snapshot of the art world. It's trade of all stripes in private collections in the States, as Kelly mentioned. And that's the real reality of it. The difference is, unlike other listing sites, things are private. So people who want to come look at them have to go through our vetting process. And likewise, the art has to go through the same vetting process, but everything is kept anonymous. So while you are dealing directly with the seller or with the buyer, depending on which side you're on, it is completely anonymous.
Well, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier about runners. I mean, the process is meant to winnow out all of the people looking for information, doing anything but actually buying. And the more we can make it possible for people to be able to have a likely buyer and a likely seller actually engage with each other, it cuts down the number of times that they have to deal with someone who there might be any sort of question around.
Yeah. We engage with all sides of the market, and we're very thorough in asking those upfront questions about where things are going, and we try to, when questions come from our sellers or our buyers about the other side, try to be as forthright as we possibly can without giving away privacy, so that you, depending on which side you're on, have a good understanding of what's going to happen with your image and the details of the work.
And a lot of this material is just, there are people, either they're collectors or trade sellers, but there's a lot of material out there that is not necessarily for sale unless there's interest. And that's part of what the platform is there for, is to be able to follow interest when people begin being interested in Etel Adnan, or there are auction sales and there are frustrated buyers who didn't get the work, but, we know of, or we can help them find a work that is, good, not a substitute, but a comparable work that maybe.
Totally. And nothing beats discovery. And before saying that, I was thinking part of it too is there's the classic thing. You sit down, I remember this from past lives in the art world. Says, what are you looking for? And you go, stuff. I don't know. So we're trying to figure out how you can have a moment of discovery. You can look for the thing that you're specifically looking for, at least the artist that you're specifically looking for. Or you might be more fluidly looking by genre or type, or just kind of finding different pathways, because not everybody thinks the same about how they're going to get to an object they might be interested in. that you can create those pathways. So, it's trying to get past that mental cloud of like, what'd you see at the art fair today? Stuff. It's how do you make a more concrete sort of sticky memory about things? And I think in time we'll see live art evolve into a place where, we're not just facilitating the seller being able to show what they are looking to move onwards, but also allow buyers to come in and say, hey, I'd really like to find this, which could maybe spark that, get past that mental cloud and say, oh, I've got one of those and it's just in a box, and I'd be actually very happy to sell that, and like get a conversation going that way too.
Yeah, or that feeling of I have this thing, I like this thing, but if you really wanted it, I'd be just happy to see someone else be happy with it too. It's not necessarily stuff sitting in a crate in storage. Not
remaining in my capital C collection, so I'm going to put my art buyer hat on and I'm going to see that out the door. I think a big thing that comes up is like is live art trying to take over the dealer world and things like that, and I actually don't think so, and I think it's more of a symbiotic relationship. The way that I view it is, what can be happening in a live art marketplace can inform what happens at coffee on Madison Avenue, can inform what happens in an art fair while visiting galleries, and vice versa. Those two things can operate together more than separate. They don't need to be siloed away from each other. And it's more moving. I don't think it's about the metaverse or anything like that. It's about the sort of expanded nature of the market and where you go to find things. And I think the more that live art becomes that central place of data, being able to find things, a hub in the art world, I think is really exciting.
I think that's an important point, right? The high touch work of dealing with clients, which you two do at LiveArt, but the goal is for LiveArt to grow and the platform to expand, to amplify what you do, but not keep adding more bodies to do that. We would just soon see art advisors and dealers and collectors themselves do that themselves on the platform, so that there's a way for it to expand.
Art is special, and all types of art are special, and were special when they were acquired by different people. And as we said earlier in this conversation, collections evolve and things change. And the fact of the matter is there's going to be more art today than there was yesterday, and the same will be true again tomorrow, and I've said it a bunch of times. And there's not another auction you can put in the calendar, be it online, and they're all online now except for the big ones, but there's no more space, right? So there's got to be places for trade to occur outside the traditional channels. And really, as Adam Chin even said early on, it's expanding the pie and expanding where those conversations can take place.
And I think it's a really nice complement to the existing structures. I think when you have a work to sell, you have your options of, you can go and sell it at an auction house, where you kind of have a few week sprint to the auction where it's, you're kind of relying a lot on chance and whether or not the right buyer is going to stand in front of it and pay the right price, and whether or not they're going to be bidding against somebody who's willing to bid that up. At the same time, you could go back to the gallery where you bought it, but a lot of times, they're prioritizing their primary market material. They're not going to put their best secondary market material in a fair booth, and they're not necessarily going to, that's never going to be seen in an exhibition. And so I think there's a lot of room for what we're doing, and, it really presents sellers with a unique opportunity that wasn't being met.
It's the matchmaking of finding someone who's going to be excited about this thing, as excited as you were, not someone who feels like, oh yeah, I made a promise I'd buy it back from you, so I guess I have to do that. Or sure, we can shove that as lot 287, in between 6 other lots that look a lot like it, and maybe some of those guys in the back wall will want to pick it up for cheap and all.
Totally. It's kind of about getting the exposure while also kind of mitigating risk. It's not, you're not burning the work at auction.
And we're primarily talking about the kinds of, we keep using the detail as an example because this is the level of work we're talking about. Things from 50,000 to what level?
Like up to $1 million and just above, that proper real middle market. The average sale value on LiveArt right now is around $100,000. And that's trending upwards, where in Q2 was about $75,000. And that seems to be where the middle market has settled into in recent years. that's not to say that there aren't great things to buy below $50,000 or, into $10,000.
And you've sold numerous things in the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000.
Correct. And today we sold something for $11,000. So, it
balances out.
It's all in the mix.
But the 11,000 is because you can make that contact in the sale. You're doing that to make a buyer and seller happy. The platform's not going to live or die on those kinds of things at all.
But these are the sales that collectors also, if they're just starting out, this might be where their budget really is and what they can really afford to put on their wall for a while, and then taste change, needs change, and it's time to sell that object. And likewise, somebody wants to buy in, then, maybe they missed their opportunity when it was $3,000 on the primary market, but they still want the artist. And that's a service and a value proposition that LiveArt offers, because you are handling it direct, and the work isn't having to move until it's sold. Lowering those touch points and all that cost means that we can offer service at that level where, bigger brokerage, bigger houses need the bigger transaction values to justify existence, whereas a sale at $10,000 to $15,000 would normally say, what's my motivation for getting that done right now beyond client service? Why don't we just toss it into an auction and fingers crossed hope for the best?
And I suppose we should mention there is a feature on the platform where you can upload the details of works that you own. So one, you can track the value of them using our artificial intelligence estimator. You get a decent sense of what the sort of present day value is. But it's also a way for you to have that optionality if you see things going, or we have a wish list come towards you for you to make a decision if you want to make it available. It's not visible otherwise in any way. It's your choice to do that, but it's far less than having to start from scratch and say, gee, maybe, how do I list this tomorrow? It's already listed in there, which is not that different from being pre-qualified and vetted to buy something. Once you've done that, it makes it easier to make a transaction.
And that's to say, too, it's all that information is private. It's yours. It's not for us to see until you say, hey, could you take a look at this? And the other part of that, and this goes back to kind of expanding the pie, is there are things which ultimately are probably better placed back with a gallerist. You're probably going to get someone who can really tell that narrative of that artwork and really wax poetic about it and get the sale done for you. And at the same time, there's probably things where if you are completely money motivated and don't care about relationships, like, go to auction with it. You are going to have a payday. So, and it's naive to think that all things should come to LiveArt, or all things should go to auction, or all things should go back to a gallery or a dealer. It's all in the mix and all in the soup, and what's right one day might not be correct the next day. So it's about being as a consumer, as a collector, it's about being as informed as you possibly can to make the best possible choice that you can. I think, Kelly is very adept at making a good sale and getting people engaged and loving a new discovery. And that, and I'd love to see all our property go her way, but at the same time, not everything will, and nor should everything. So,
and eventually also we want to build confidence, right? The more people deal with you two individually and are comfortable with how we do business and the platform, there will come a point where they don't necessarily need you to push the button and make a deal. And the more we can sort of make that possible for both sides of the equation to meet, then everyone gets a better transaction at a faster pace on their own time.
This peer-to-peer for me was born out of, I'd get a phone call from a collector and they'd say, hey, what do you think of this? And I'd say, oh, it's good. Like, what's the story? And they'd say, oh, I'm being offered it. It's at this price. I'm like, that's a good price. Are you going to do it? And they think, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then you check in a couple weeks later and say, did you get it? Do you have it at home? Like, love to come see it. And they say, oh, no, like, I didn't trust wiring off that money, something like I didn't know if it was actually going to get sent to me, that trust issue. Like, LiveArt looks to bake that trust in, and we are here to, if you have somebody who's made an offer, like, you want to check and like see if that's a fair offer and like go over the data a bit, like, we can do that. You don't have to sit at home, staring into the abyss of green and red lines and, Marion's tomes on all the market movements. Like, you can ask a question. That's why we are the humans behind this, and we come from gallery and advisory and auction and years of experience, in different facets of the contemporary art world. So ask a question. Yeah, you need referral to a third-party advisor. We know a bunch. We do this great interview series with them as well. Meet these people, talk to them. This is your passion project. Maybe it's like a side little investment thing for you. There are other people who work in your passion project, so talk to them.
One other thing to mention is that, when people list with us, they have the option to list publicly. Did we already mention this? Or they have the option to list publicly, or they can list privately, where it'll just show people on the app a grid of images, and they won't show the exact image, but people can inquire and get specific information if they're approved. We also do a number of offline deals too. So if people want to sell something that they prefer never see the light of day, we're happy to work with those too.
So I think that gets back to the point of, we are a technology company. We're building all sorts of software to make these things eventually turn into a process. But until then, we have experienced people in the art market who can say, you can tell what you're looking for. They can say, yeah, that's pretty close to what you're looking for. If you can settle on a price, you'll probably be happy with it. It makes it more of a chance that you will actually engage in that conversation. There's some people who want to, here's the work, this is what it is, and people want to buy it. Others don't want it to be burned, and that's why we've created a way to do that. I suspect as time goes on and more people work through our platform, we will have better indications of the kind of software to build to make that work even better for them, and eventually make it possible, for the medium on.
Going back to the beginning of the conversation and what Kelly's talking about, public, private, and offline traditional private sales, I think that is part of what the changing nature of the art world conversation has become. I can remember when I was first head of like a day sale, you kind of go live with the catalog, and then you'd expect the phone to start ringing and people say, hey, send me condition reports on these 10 things. And you'd kind of whittle down their list as you got towards the auction and what they were actually bidding on. And you sort of knew who was going to ask for condition reports and stuff. Enter the dawn of, self-service over the websites, and all you'd know is that somebody looked at a condition report or requested it through a portal. And now with online bidding and, the most, change of the art world, people don't even want you to call them. They're going to do it themselves. They might tell you if they're going to come in and look at it in person. But other than that, some people want self-service. Here are my tools. I can make my decisions. I'll call you if there's a problem, but otherwise I'm good. And there are other people who want to come in, have the glass of champagne, have the chat, look at the thing, wax poetic about it.
Sell me on this.
Yeah, exactly. So all those things and everything in between is the art world, and we just add a tool across, as we said, between public, here's my thing, someone's going to come along and buy it. Private, I want someone who's really keen to look at this, and I want a good hit rate of anyone who asks about it is a truly interested client. To offline, hey, if you know somebody who's interested in this, why don't you give them a call?
No, I think that maybe the best place to sort of end is the online bidding has been around for quite some time. It took a long time for people to get comfortable with it. Will it work? Will they see my bid? And then certainly in the last 2 years with the pandemic, it went from maybe I'll try it to in many ways becoming a necessity because people either couldn't show up for the room or everything was in that format. It was easier. And so it makes sense for having that behavior become ingrained and comfortable to extend it to different aspects of transactions, because not everything's an auction.
If you can do online bidding in an auction, why can't you do online private sales? You can do online viewing rooms, gallery presentations. Why can't you do the same in a private sale?
And the art world has been selling, this whole thing about the art world not being online. People have been selling art via emailed JPEGs for 20 years now.
Totally.
Since the Blackberries came in.
Yeah, as soon as you could send a PDF with JPEGs on it, there you go. We're off to the races.
Well, thank you both for taking the time with this. I think it's helpful for people who don't understand how live art works to get a better sense of it. And I've certainly learned a little.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us at the Artelligence Podcast, edited by Kelly Cahn, who also composed the original music. For more episodes, listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to download the LiveArt app or visit us at liveart.io. Please join us for the next episode of the Artelligence Podcast. We're looking forward to it.